while we are gathered here, we have a brother in the Lord Jesus Christ that probably no one in this room has ever met. Probably no one in this room could even identify a picture of, who is somewhere right now in a jail cell in Afghanistan awaiting an order to execute him. And the crime that our brother has committed, that he's being charged with by his government, a government that only exists and only is surviving to this day because of the strength of the United States military sending back Taliban forces. His crime is the fact that he has announced exactly what these two men have announced in the waters of this baptistry: Jesus Christ is Lord. And because he has turned from Islam to faith in the Lord Jesus, he is being charged with breaking the law, breaking a law that is a capital offense, and he may well, in the next several days or weeks, lose his life for the gospel of Jesus Christ. What I want to suggest to you this morning is that his situation in the history of the church is not the oddity. Our situation in the history of the church is the oddity. It is not a strange thing that the enemies of the gospel should see the gospel of Jesus Christ as a threat that ought to be silenced at the point of the sword. What is the oddity is that other enemies of the gospel of Jesus Christ would see the gospel as no threat at all. Precisely because that gospel has been muted. The Apostle Paul, though, knows everything of what it means to wait in a jail cell waiting for execution. He understands and knows, as he is writing out these words that we have just read a few minutes ago, that it will only be a matter of time before the guard comes and says to him, "Come with me." It will only be a matter of time until he will feel his head being placed upon a stone block. It will only be a matter of time until he hears an axe cutting a cord. And it will only be a matter of time until his head is rolling in a pile of blood. That is what Christian after Christian after Christian after Christian after Christian has faced throughout the history of the world. And it is perhaps what Christian after Christian after Christian after Christian will face in the years to come. But what is the apostolic word when it comes to this kind of suffering? He speaks a word to Timothy that is not a word of personal whining. It is not a word of personal anxiety. And it certainly is not a word of how could God allow this to happen to me? How could this have taken place? Instead, Paul writes in his weakness and in his chains with a word of power and a word of strength to this young man who is facing his own kind of suffering. He is not arrested. He is not facing execution. But he's facing a church that is in turmoil. He's facing a church in which false teachers have come in, and they are bringing in with them something other than the gospel that he has received. He's living in a culture in which the people on the outside of the culture find Christianity to be offensive and repulsive and just downright weird. And Paul writes to him, and from the dungeon, Paul says, "Be strong."